Hey everybody, and Tony here with the review of Donizetti's Anna Bolena with conductor Gianpaolo Visanti, which was live from the Teatro Sao Carlos in Lisbon, Portugal. And this was also the same production headed by Graham Vick, which if you've watched my review of Mariela de Villa's Anna Bolena live back in 2007 at the Teatro Filarmonica in Vienna, you'll automatically realize that I definitely enjoy this particular production. From the really lavish scenario, especially when it comes to some of the sets being used and those two horses that Anna and Enrico ride on, even though they're technically stews. And I especially love the equally lavish costumes. So I'm not going to mince words here about Graham Vick's production of Anna Bolena. It is stunning and gorgeous, and it's quite the eye catcher to I was really anticipating on making this review because Elena Mosuc made her stage debut as Anna Bolena, even though she sang this particular role 10 years ago at the Vienna concert house and managed to keep Coppia, iniqua, and even the aria preceding that, dolce, guidami, as concert pieces in a lot of the venues that she was in, and she even included dolce, guidami and come innocente, giovane in her album Bel Canto Heroines, or more specifically, Donizetti Heroines. And how well did she hold up in this particular role when she made her stage debut as Anna? I thought she held up really well. Elena Mosuc needs no introduction whatsoever, and it should be no surprise that I enjoy her as a singing actress. What I really love about her is that she throws herself into these characters and she has a very wonderful stage presence, really, really involving, and you really do feel for her no matter what character she plays as, and that is definitely really awesome. I really love the moments where she was able to just give Anna her dignity, her charm, her grace, and she just made the character of Anna Bolena come alive in her own special way. But more than anything, it is her voice that manages to stay as exciting as always. Sure, there are a few moments in which her voice does sound a little bit on the screechy side, but despite all that, the few flaws found here in between, she managed to give a very wonderful reading of Anna. She embodied this character in terms of grace, beauty, and dignity, and she managed to do a very great job not only singing the role of Anna Bolena, but also just giving her a lot of dramatic flair. And that is just what she did. She gave a lot of dramatic flair to Anna Bolena that she was just so involving as a singing actress. And that is something I consider to be very, very great. And it's one of her most major assets, especially when it comes to playing characters like this. So I'm not going to mince words here about Elena Mosuc's portrayal of Anna Bolena. I thought she did a very, very great job, and I have to give her all of my kudos for a very great stage debut in this particular. Then we have her foil, Giovanna Seymour, sung by the very fine American Zwischenfach singer, well, more specifically, a lyric mezzo who is also trying out her luck in soprano roles, the ever wonderful Jennifer. Now, I mainly knew about this mezzo through name only, as she specializes in a lot of the lyric mezzo roles, though as I was reading her repertoire, she seems to go through the direction of singing a lot more spinto soprano roles. Roles that she might end up singing are the likes of Cassandra from Le Doyen, and maybe even Zeglinde from Viva Cura, and even Vitellia from La Clemenza di Tito, even though once upon a time she was quite well known for singing Sesto from that very same. What I notice about Jennifer Holloway, especially when it comes to her voice, is that she manages to have a lot of the characteristics of a true soprano, as in she has a lot of the easy high notes and a very high sounding quality to her voice, and it is a very lovely voice that she has. It's not really the most incisive voice I've heard, nor is it weak. It is just right. It manages it manages to have that certain loveliness and that really gorgeous quality while at the same time being quite full. And sure, there are times her voice may not be as cutting as anyone would like to expect it to be, but she manages to have very fine musicality and she is absolutely lovely on stage. She has a very sleek and beautiful presence, which makes her so appropriate for her characterization as Giovanna Seymour, and she just did an overall fine job singing this particular. She was just absolutely gorgeous as Giovanna Seymour, that her voice, along with Elena Mosuc's voice in the duet, blended pretty well, even though Elena manages to steal her. So overall, I found Jennifer Holloway's portrayal of Giovanna Seymour to be quite lovely in terms of its, especially when it comes to that really lovely color in her voice, which manages to be a fine balance between lyric mezzo in some of the passages to being true soprano. And I could definitely see a great future for Madame Holloway seeing a lot of these Zwischenfach or even a lot of these soprano roles. Heck, she even sang Salome at the Semper Oper Dresden, though I was not there to witness it. Lily Jörstad was a very gorgeous Smeton. She had a very lovely voice, and she was quite boyish in this particular character. She manages to really find the humor, the charm, and the lovability with Smeton while making him a very dashing and a bit of a fun-loving character. She was just a very fine singing actress, and she just has a very, very lovely voice, which is so clean and clear throughout all the registers. And I also loved her solo numbers, thus showing a lot of promise. And from what I could tell from someone as young and lovely as Miss Lily Jörstad, she definitely has a very bright future. Then we also go to the men's part, starting off with Enrico, sung by the fabulous Turkish basso, Burak Bilgili, whose handsome presence and equally handsome basso cantante voice made Enrico a very strong, sturdy, and stern figure on stage. He had a very warm color to his voice, and he was also very handsome, both vocally and dramatically. He had a very, very dashing voice and equally dashing looks, making him quite fine in this particular. He was just so awesome as Enrico that I practically just had my own heart melt every time he appeared on the stage. He just had a very commanding and fine stage presence, which is thus helped by a voice which is really focused and clean, and manages to have that really fine and warm texture without sounding too rough around the edges, nor too. It's a very smooth sounding, which is quite homogeneous throughout all the registers, and Mr. Virgili was a very accomplished singing. Leonardo Cortellazzi did a very decent job singing the role of Riccardo. He has a very fine, light lyric tenor voice, and it did take him a little bit of time to really warm it up, especially since he started off quite okay. But I thought in the last few acts, well, more specifically, his aria, Vivu, Te ne scongiuro, was the part where he really gave it his all. And I thought he did a very fine job all through. Sure, his voice in the beginning did kind of leave an iffy impression on me, but it was still a very fine, youthful, and a very sweet sounding voice. He was able to really use it very well, and his high notes were really finely tuned. And even though I would have loved to have a more spinto tenor voice to sing Riccardo Persi with a lot of high notes, I thought that Leonardo Cortellazzi really did his best singing this particular role. It is not an easy job singing Riccardo Persi because he has a lot of high notes. But I really have to give it to someone as stylish and really fine like Leonardo Cortellazzi, who is able to sing this particular role with a lot of charm, beauty, elegance, style, and he just managed to really make the role of Riccardo Persi his own. And he did a very fine job all through. Luis Rodriguez as Rochefort was absolutely wonderful. I really love the texture of his voice. To me, it sounds like a finely tuned cello, one that you can play a lot of really wonderful sonatas with, and one that you can master wonderfully. His voice had that full body, just like one of the finest red wines I've ever tasted, and that's something I can definitely compare to. It's so easily comparable to a finely tuned cello and some of the best red wine I have ever tried. He has a very supple and voluptuous voice that I was able to feel so enamored every time he was on stage and every time he opened his mouth. Then we go to Marco Alves dos Santos, who did a very great job singing the role of Lee. To me, his voice sounded like a very finely tuned, very focused throughout all the registers, and it's a very wonderful vocal instrument that Senor Marco Alves dos Santos has. So overall, the singing was really wonderful all around, but I really have to give it to Elena Mosuc, who, as always, stole the show in the titular heroine of Anna Bolena, and the conducting done by Maestro Gianpaolo Bisanti was really well done. I kind of wish that he could have paid a little bit more attention to how some of the nuances went, like the duet between Enrico and Giovanna. I would have loved for some passages to be a little bit more lento or even a little bit more nuanced in some places. There are times I realize that the orchestra playing was a little bit too fast for my tastes, especially in some areas, but when it had to really put the fuel in the fire, it did just that. And the best moments really have to be Giudici ad Anna and, of course, Coppia, iniqua. They were just some of the best moments when it comes to this particular production, and I definitely felt that Maestro Bisanti did a very great job just leading the chorus and orchestra. And speaking of the chorus and orchestra of the Teatro Sao Carlos in Lisbon, Portugal, they all did a very fine job from beginning. So overall, with a very lavish production created by Graham Vick and excellent singing, most especially Elena Mosuc in the titular heroine of Anna Bolena, and a fine conductor in the form of Gianpaolo Bisanti, this production of Anna Bolena was simply put wonderful. And you can even watch some excerpts of Elena Mosuc's Anna Bolena live from the Teatro Sao Carlos on the links provided on the description box below. And for those of you who watched this particular production of Anna Bolena, what did you think of it? Was there a singer who stood out to you so well, or did you feel like there were some weak links here or there? Comment below and let. Well, that's all for now. Be sure to tune in later for my review of yet another version of Donizetti's Anna Bolena, but this time it's an album review with Beverly Sills in the titular role, which was recorded back in 1972. So until then,